Well, hello and welcome back everybody to the first devlog of the year for VAHRIN'S, our story-driven RPG set in the high fantasy world of Leda. With everything that we have planned, everything that we're working on at the moment, and everything that's still to come, 2022 is looking to be a massive year for VAHRIN'S. I hope you all had a chance to spend some time with loved ones over the holidays and are ready to hit the ground running this year, just like us. Before we get into the meat of what we've been busy with since we last spoke, I want to take a brief moment to revisit the very first video that we posted to our YouTube channel and social media pages, over a year ago now. I am of course referring to our alpha trailer, which we still get messages about to this day. People saying how they just checked out the trailer and they really like what they see and are excited for the game. And you know, that's just awesome to hear. It's great to receive positive comments in general, but it's also allowed us on the team to reflect back on just how far the game has come in what's been one of the quickest years imaginable. Looking back on this trailer, VAHRIN'S, or well, what was Exodus Rising at the time, was a completely different game. You know, this was all the way back when we were still trying to figure out what the best approach would be to tackling the story progression. Watching this video back, I noticed so many areas in this trailer that have been drastically refined and improved, and other areas that, for the better, are just no longer a part of VAHRIN'S. This was back before we decided to diversify our environments more, to make the world more interesting and fun to explore. Locations like the snowy mountains and the magma-filled Eternite mine didn't even exist at the time. And even more recently, the addition of the weather system, the character art revamp, the UI overhaul. Stay tuned for that one in just a second. There are tons of changes that this game has gone through in such a short period of time, and the alpha trailer has become this nice video for us on the team to look back on and reminisce on just how far VAHRIN'S has come. Anyway, I'll stop because otherwise I'll be here all day. Let's save the post-mortem for when the game is actually finished, shall we? So, with that being said, what have we been up to over the past month and a half? Well, this time round, why don't we start with the biggest thing first? So this is something that has been in the works for quite some time now. We've finally been able to get around to replacing the temporary UI that we were using before, in favour of a new UI that we think suits the style of VAHRIN'S much better. Of course, as with everything, we would absolutely love to hear what you think of this new style. Just keep in mind that everything you see here is still a work in progress. When we began tackling this overhaul, we knew that we didn't want to stop at just a visual upgrade though. We had noticed when testing the game that certain sections of the UI just didn't feel as natural or intuitive to navigate as we wanted them to, and so addressing this issue became a priority for us whilst deciding on the new visual style. We also wanted our new UI to allow us to easily expand the game's content as we continue on with development, but we'll come back to this in just a little bit. So the biggest change that we've made is the layout of the main menu, which consists of your character's stats, inventory, abilities, journal, compendium, and map. On a side note, I'm hoping to do a little more of a deep dive into each of these tabs at some point, potentially in the next devlog, just to give you all a better understanding of what to expect with each of them. So before the overhaul, this is the old UI that we had in place for the inventory. You navigated around by initially selecting a tab across the very top, using your mouse or left trigger right trigger if playing on controller. You would then turn your eyes to this row of icons, which when clicked would update the info in the far left panel. In this case, clicking on the shield icon displayed all of the shields that I have in my inventory. From here you can select an item, the stats of which can be found in the box above. It was then intended that your character model would be displayed in this white box, with your character stats on the far right. Now at first this might seem pretty easy to understand, but when you take a deeper look you start to see some fundamental issues. When navigating this menu, your eyes are thrown all over the place. To better demonstrate this, let's play out a situation where I'm trying to pick out a new weapon to take into the next boss fight. First of all, I navigate to the inventory panel, and then click on the weapons icon to filter out everything I don't need to see. My eyes are then taken down to the panel on the left, where I begin to scroll through my list of weapons, keeping my eyes focused on the box above to see the information update. Here I'm scrolling down, but my eyes are focused to the top of the panel. Can you see why this might feel a little odd to navigate? And this is only one scenario. What if I wanted to mix and match different pieces of armor to create a really cool looking set, but I'm also conscious about how that will affect the stats of my character? Well, I would go to the inventory panel, select one of the category icons, and then scroll through the list equipping different items, all whilst keeping an eye on the stats of the item, the overall stats of my character, and how the item looks on my character. Additionally, not only are your eyes being thrown down, up, down, left, right with this UI, but they're also being forced to read both horizontally with the rows along the top and vertically with the item and stats panels, really jarring on the eyes. This UI was needlessly messy and needed to change. Introducing the new layout, and we've gone for something a lot more simple. First of all, each of the tabs, inventory, compendium, abilities, and so on, are now accessed through a list. Clicking on the inventory tab will put you into the inventory screen. Here you can see that we've removed the category icons from the old UI and replaced them with nested lists that display all of your items. The item info can then be found to the right when hovering over an item. To get back to the tabs from before, you simply navigate down to the bottom of this new list and select back to menu. Have I said list enough yet, by the way? But this really does make a huge difference. Everyone is familiar with how a list works, and so they're very easy to navigate. Furthermore, by removing the horizontal text and icons that we had along the top, we were able to simplify the way in which we present information to you. All you need to do is scroll the list, and all of the info that you need is displayed to the right. Your eyes now have to do a lot less work navigating the UI because no key elements are being kept at the top of the screen away from everything else. Of course, when it comes to the main tabs that we had along the top, they will now require an extra button press to get to. And with minimizing button presses as much as possible being key to a good user experience, this is partially why we had the tabs along the top in the first place, for ease of access. However, in this case, we believe the extra button press is a small price to pay, because the layout feels infinitely more intuitive and is a lot more natural for the eyes to follow. I mentioned before how we wanted a new UI that allowed us to expand the content of VAHRIN'S with ease moving forward, adding additional skills for example. And this new layout that we've gone for allows us to do just that. Previously, adding additional icons to this row would have been tricky, as they're all centered to the screen. This means that after adding a new icon, whether that be on the left, right, or anywhere in between, we would need to recenter all of the icons again afterwards. It doesn't seem like it would cause that much trouble, but it's a lot of unnecessary effort that could be avoided if we used a smarter layout. Wait, did somebody say list? But yeah, it's as you've most probably already guessed by now, adding new categories is now much easier with this new layout, because we can simply expand the nested list to include an additional line of text for the new category. This is perhaps an even better solution for what we previously had in place for the ability screen. As you can see, before we had the skills and spells represented by icons and organized into different panels. But this would be an absolute nightmare to rework if we had to expand it, as the abilities on screen are specifically positioned and aligned with one another. Solution? Boom. List. You get the layout by now. Before we move on, I do want to briefly touch on the challenges that we faced, and still continue to face, of designing a user interface to work with both keyboard, mouse, and gamepad. It can be very difficult to create a UI that feels good to navigate on both input types, because how you use each of them in games is fundamentally different. We encountered issues playing on keyboard mouse with the old UI because the horizontal tabs and icons along the top worked much better for the bumpers on a controller. However, we also faced issues on controller because we needed to differentiate the buttons used to cycle through these two different rows. This left us with left and right bumper for the inventory icons and left and right trigger for the menu tabs. The latter of which felt odd to use because, as I'm sure all of you know, the triggers on a controller don't click like the bumpers and buttons do. In the UI, the transition of going from one tab to the next was instant, which felt like it needed a button press rather than the more slow, easing feeling that you get from pressing down a trigger. With all of that in mind though, I'm happy to say that we've now managed to achieve a good balance with the new UI, and it's feeling good to navigate on both input types. As we continue to polish this UI, we'll be sure to keep you all up to date on any key changes that we decide to make. Okay, moving on. Besides this UI overhaul, what else have we got to show you all? Since updating to the new characters back in October, we've had to dedicate a lot of time to adjusting all of the clothing for the new masculine and feminine bodies. This has been an ongoing effort to ensure that the clothing doesn't deform weirdly or clip into the skin, and because of the ability to mix and match different pieces of armor however you like, it's been a long and tedious process going through all of the possible combinations. However, with that being said, we're trying our best to minimize the clipping as much as possible, and the improvements so far are really noticeable. Staying on the topic of characters, they're finally starting to get hair again, and it's now better than ever. After switching to the new style of characters, we knew that we didn't want to keep the old hair that we were using before, and hair cards are something that we had always hoped that we would be able to have in VAHRIN'S. It's taken quite a long time to get this working, but we're now finally in a position where we can show you some of the hairstyles that you'll be able to customize your character with. The UI and functionality of the new character creator is still currently in the works, but by February everything should be up and running. In next month's devlog, we should be able to give you a good look at how the new character customization will work in VAHRIN'S with all of the improvements that we've been making. To end off today's video, let's step away from characters and talk about a few of the quality of life improvements that we've made since we last spoke. I say a few, because as always there have been way too many to list them all off in just one video. We noticed that the particles that kick up off the ground when you're running through snowy areas were appearing on every type of surface whenever it was snowing outside, regardless of whether that surface had snow on it or not. So you could, for example, be walking around inside a building, but if it was snowing outside, then the snow particles would still kick up off the ground behind your feet. Not what you'd expect to see coming off of bone-dry wooden floorboards, to say the least. Anyway, with some tweaks, the snow effect now only applies when you're standing on a snowy surface. Additionally, using the same system, rain now works just like snow does, and is even able to differentiate between whether you're standing in a puddle or not, which worked much better than we had expected it to. And lastly, we've been continuing to add and improve many sound effects over the last month, but as someone who uses Fireball a lot, this new impact sound is the one that stands out to me the most. What do you guys think of it? And with that, January's devlog comes to a close. Coming back this year, we really have been all hands on deck, working on so many other things beyond what we covered in this video. As I mentioned at the beginning, 2022 is going to be a big year for VAHRIN'S, and we hope you'll all stick around to see what the future holds for this game. As always, you can find the links to our Steam page, social media platforms, and Discord server in the description if you want to stay up to date on everything VAHRIN'S. Thank you all so much for watching as always, and I will catch you all next month. Take care, guys.